Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Anna Pletcher. I'm a partner at O'Melveny & Myers, and I'm also the Deputy Regional Director of Programs for the Hispanic National Bar Association. On behalf of all of our sponsors today, the Hispanic National Bar Association, San Francisco La Raza, the Association of Latino Marin Attorneys, the American Constitution Society, and O'Melveny & Myers, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this panel discussion. Our topic today is running for judicial office. We're going to learn some lessons from Latinx judges who ran and won. We're so honored today to be joined by 3 judges who did that. And I'm so excited, as I'm sure you are too, to hear them share your experiences. Before I introduce our distinguished panel, I want to take just a minute to set the stage, to explain why today's discussion is so important. Judges bring with them their experiences, their backgrounds, and their unique perspectives. When courts reflect the diversity of the people it serves, it boosts the public's trust and confidence in our judicial system. Of California's 1,732 state court judges, only 32% of them describe themselves as a race or ethnicity other than white. Yet 63% of Californians describe themselves as a race or ethnicity other than white. 11% of California judges describe themselves as of Latino background, compared to 39% of California's population. At the federal level, people of color make up just 27% of all active Article III judges, and only 9% identify as Latinx. So we have a long way to go before we reach a truly representative bench. Fortunately for us here in the Bay Area, we have 3 elected Latinx judges who are going to speak with us about their experiences running for their seat on the bench. And hopefully they will inspire some of our listeners today to follow in their footsteps. Starting with the longest serving of the group, Judge Daniel Flores. Judge Flores was elected to the San Francisco County Superior Court in 2014. He made it through a primary election against 2 other candidates and ultimately won the general election with a commanding 59.7% of the vote. Before running for judge, Judge Flores worked at Ropers, Majeski, John, Cone, Bentley, and the San Francisco Public Defender's Office before opening his own law firm. He received his undergraduate degree from California State University and his law degree from the University of the Pacific George School of Law. Judge Sheila Lichtcblau. Judge Lichtcblau was elected to the Marin County Superior Court in 2016, making history as the first woman of color ever on the Marin County bench. Judge Lichtcblau won a primary against 8 other candidates and went on to win a tough general election with 51.9% of the vote. Prior to running for judge, Judge Lichtcblau served as a deputy county counsel in Marin and as a partner at Wright Robinson, Ossamer & Tatum, and Rubicon Legal Services. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of California, Berkeley, and her law degree from the University of California, Hastings College of the Law. And finally, Judge-elect Evangelista. Judge-elect Evangelista is the newest elected judge on our panel, winning her seat on the San Francisco Superior Court in January 2020. She will be sworn in January 2021. She first ran for judge in 2018 and came up short, but she didn't give up. The second time around, she crushed her opponent, winning with 64.9% of the vote. Before winning this election, Judge-elect Evangelista served as a deputy public defender in San Francisco and interned in the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. She received her undergraduate degree from San Francisco State University and her law degree from Vanderbilt University. Thank you so much to all of our distinguished guests for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
We are going to dive in now to some questions, and we have a list of exciting questions for all of you, but we're going to start off with an easy one here just to set the stage. Why did you want to be a judge? So let's start with Judge-elect Evangelista, since she is our newest elected judge on the panel.
So first of all, thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be a Latina and to now have the opportunity to be on the bench, especially in San Francisco. For me, it was kind of a gradual process. I've been working in the San Francisco courts since the 90s in one capacity or another. I started off at the DA's office. And eventually, I think after 16, 17 years of being a trial attorney, I mean, I was in court every day. And I just realized that I could do the job of a judge. It was a natural progression and an evolution of my skill set, because being a trial attorney is definitely an acquired, a skill, a craft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks. Judge Lichtcblau, going in reverse order of seniority.
So for me, it was as well a process. I didn't go to law school thinking I wanted to be a judge. I knew that I wanted to serve the public at some point in some capacity, and had done that. And when I was a deputy county counsel, I was serving the county of Marin through the various departments by giving the various departments advice. And at some point, it occurred to me that I really would enjoy serving the public and the constituents of Marin in a more direct capacity. And so that's what really inspired me to think about becoming a judge. And in that process, I did take some steps to make sure that this is what I wanted to do. I started pro temping, so serving as a judge for the small claims department, and I also began serving as a mediator, volunteering as a mediator for the Northern District of Federal Court. And so through that process, I really decided, yes, this was something that I wanted to do, but I did take a little bit of time in making sure that this was the right path for me.
Good. And Judge
Thank
Flores.
you for. I'm left. Thank you for having me. I must say I kind of like the seniority business. It's a little. That's a little new to me. Nonetheless, thank you for having me. And all jokes aside, I was a litigator for about 14 years, and spent the last 8 years as a criminal defense attorney. Was in court pretty much every day throughout the Bay Area in private practice, and it really became apparent that who the audience was, that being the judge most of the time, was really important and critical to what the outcome of justice would be. I was very inspired by judges who were hardworking, who really showed empathy and cared for people who appeared before them. I was also inspired in a different way by judges who showed a little less of that. And the combination of that really brought home the idea that if I really wanted to serve, especially in my hometown of San Francisco, that this would be a great way to do it. A law geek, so this would be, the way to do it for me.
Wonderful. Well, we're all very fortunate that you chose the path that you did. Now, judges in California can either be appointed or elected. Now, all of you ended up running for office, so let's get into that a little bit more. Starting with Judge Lichtcblau, why is it that you ran for office as opposed to going through the appointments process?
Well, I actually did have my application pending in the application process. But Marin County is a small county. There are only 12 judges. Appointment slots don't come up that often. So while my application was pending, this seat opened up. And so I decided that I would explore this alternative route. Of course, when I decided to do this, I didn't realize that 8 other candidates were going to join the race. So that made it a little challenging. But I took advantage of that opening because the process for applications can take a very long time. And it can be a little bit political. I think that the judge who ended up vacating her seat did so at a time where to create actually an opening. I believe that Judge Diopel, the retiring judge, stated that she wanted the people of Marin County to decide. And so I jumped on that opportunity while my application was pending.
Mm-hmm. Judge Flores, how did you end up running as opposed to being appointed?
So I had not begun an application process, and that probably would have happened sometime later. I was quite frankly caught by surprise by the opportunity to become a candidate for judicial office. It was something I was aware of. I watched Judge Gerardo Sandoval run for election. And so I knew the concept of it, but I wasn't anticipating doing that. I had just settled a case that I had cleared 2 weeks out for trial. And I was in my office when I found out about the idea. But I'm very grateful that I did. It was actually Judge Sandoval that reached out and made sure that I was aware that such a thing was available now in a very immediate fashion. And I'm glad I didn't know everything I know now. I might have been scared off. No need to scare you off, because
we're going to get there. Don't worry. We're going to talk about that.
But that's where I was in the process.
Judge Evangelista. Judge Eli.
I was also caught by surprise that there was an opening, an opportunity that I couldn't pass by. I actually had I had printed and filled out my judicial application form, and I'm glad that I did, because when running, you also have to go before the San Francisco Bar Association, and they grade you just the same as if you were putting in your application, whether you submit an application or not. And so I think it was good. I'd recommend that to anybody, whether they're thinking about exploring the idea, not even married to it, printing out the application, or if they're thinking about that maybe running might be the way for them to go if they don't feel that they have a certain type of political ties, but that they might be more grassroots. Printing out that application, I think, is key, is just looking at all the areas in which judges have valuable ties, things to offer to the community, and what is valued by the community in a judge. And so that's what I did, and I jumped in.
Interesting. So filling out the application helped you kind of understand, or maybe articulate better, your reasons for running, your values, and thinking through some of the things that later helped you on the campaign trail?
Right, absolutely. And not necessarily in a political sense, right? Left versus right, but just more in a sense of, what things are important to you, what things you've done for the community, what characteristics and qualities that you have that you think good judges have. Those are all questions that they're going to ask you on the application process, and there are issues that come up while you're running. So I think it's important to go ahead and start filling that out. There might be an area where you might be a little weak or deficient. You might say, oh, I did that, but I never kept track of it. And it's also a good way to keep track of all the participation that you have on the boards you've been sitting on, all those volunteer hours, what you're doing in the community. For example, I belong to my church's hospitality committee, but I never thought of that as something that that would be important for somebody thinking about, a judge is well-rounded in that way. But it's something that comes up quite a bit, actually, and it's important to make sure that the person is well-rounded on top of being qualified.
If I could just add to that,
Judge Lichtcblau, yes.
I really would echo the comments here being made about filling out an application. I certainly think that I don't think I would have been in the position of, I'm not even sure I would have run, frankly, if a position had just opened up. But I had spent a lot of time thinking about the application. I had filled it out. I had gone through our judicial nomination process and passed that process and gone through the vetting. And so I had already started to cultivate, to not only think about what it is and why I wanted to be a judge, but to be able to articulate it by filling out that application, preparing for my Jenny interview, speaking to several people, because as part of the process, you do want to get in touch with as many people as possible. You want to get potentially letters of recommendation. And all of that really did lay the groundwork for me in terms of the election, such that when it came time to jump into the election, I had established some connections and felt pretty confident in my ability to be able to articulate why I wanted to be a judge and to talk about my qualifications for being a judge.
Just for the benefit of our listeners who are not necessarily familiar, the Jenny Commission in California is a group of attorneys who vet judicial applications that go on to the governor's office. So thank you.
If I could jump in here
Yes.
briefly, I have the honor of serving on the Governor's Judicial Selection Advisory Committee for the Bay Area. And we are a committee of judges and lawyers that do somewhat of a pre-vet process before a candidate is sent to Jenny. And the application is something that is mandatory and for the process to start. And it's something that speaks volumes about the applicant, what they find important. You're asked to list most significant cases and the reasons behind those cases being significant to the applicant is significant to us. We talk about it. It's not a purpose. The purpose isn't to scrutinize, but we talk about the words people use, for example, and how they articulate, what emotions come up when you talk about that. One could tell the same story. For example, I'm saying this for the benefit of those who will be applying. Hopefully many of you watching will apply. There's a difference describing a win where your focus is on the justice that you were able to achieve for your client versus something that sounds like you're self-congratulating. And I've seen both in a very short period of time. I've also seen typos and things that should never happen on something so serious like that. But it's definitely a great tool to keep in mind. And I filled it out and passed it around to many different organizations as a judicial candidate running for election because people expect that you will have put that much thought into your race.
That's a great point. Thank you all. Let's pick up on Judge Flores, what you mentioned somewhat jokingly, but I think also not really. The fact that if you had known certain things about running for office, maybe you would have, given you cause. Hopefully you would have continued to pursue your dream. But let's get into some of that so we can just have an honest conversation about the real challenges of running for office. They are real and they can be very intense. So I'll ask whoever wants to start with this one to give us some of the biggest challenges that you faced during the campaign and how you were able to overcome them.
Fundraising.
Yes.
Yes.
Fundraising is so hard. All right, Judge Lichtcblau, tell us about that. Tell us why is it so hard? What are the
Well, asking people for money is really hard, especially when you are running for a position where you are committed to being neutral. If you are running for a political position, senator, representative, district attorney, anything like that, you usually have a platform. And for judges, it's harder to articulate a platform because you are committed to being neutral and following the rule of law. And that just doesn't sound as sexy to people as, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. So that is one of the hurdles with fundraising is people will ask, well, why should I contribute to you? And you don't have that platform that you might otherwise have if you were in a political position. It's also a little bit dicey because you cannot, as a judge there or even a judicial candidate, you cannot comment on certain matters that you may have to rule on. And so people will want you to commit to certain positions and you can't do that. So it becomes very difficult to ask people for money. And that is, from my perspective, one of the biggest challenges. I think it's challenging for any candidate elected or a candidate for office, judicial or not, to ask for money. But I think there's an extra layer of difficulty that comes with fundraising for a judicial campaign.
For me, I would say I work for the city. I worked for the city for almost 17 years, and we can't solicit funds from other city employees. So having worked for the city for that long and, making a lot of my friends and my coworkers not being able to ask them is a big pool. So going into it, you have to think of, well, who would be the people that would be able to contribute to your campaign. I mean, obviously you have to start with your phone number, with your phone list, everybody in your phone, your family, your friends, and then there's more of an extended web but it is difficult. For some people, it can be embarrassing to ask for money. And, you know, we do our own fundraising. It's not like we hire somebody to do it. You got to call them and ask. And it, you know, I would say the positive side is that there's no limit. So if somebody's able to give a little more than what the $500 did, it might offset, you know, somebody that isn't able to give as much. So you have a little flexibility and wiggle room there. But that was one of the impediments that I had in my campaign.
I had a lot of the same obstacles and difficulties. It was somewhat difficult, a little embarrassing to ask people for money in a way that, you know, trying to balance asking for an amount of money that was, you know, asking for more money than maybe someone has ever given, right? I'll never forget talking to one of my friends from college, and I asked him, said, yeah, so, you know, $500 would go a long way. And he said, $500? Like, you know, I was hoping you might, you know, give me 1,000, but, you know, he said, well, you know, that's a lot of money. And he started telling me a little bit more about his family circumstance. And I was like, wow, you know, that's not what, I didn't expect to go down that path, but maybe I should have. You know, ultimately he gave me $250, which I much appreciated. But that's a small example of how asking for money can be awkward. It could also be very time consuming. So as a separate issue with that, I personally felt rude just calling in for money without doing a long explanation about what I hope to accomplish with people that I haven't talked to for a while, doing a little catch up and, you know, why this is significant. Are there other areas you want to talk about with respect to?
Well, let's get into fundraising a little bit more, since you brought it up as being possibly the biggest challenge of running a campaign. Let's put some numbers on this. So how much did you have to raise?
So first, let me segue here. I will answer the question, but I think it's important to talk about every county is different. Yes. Your jurisdiction is going to be very different, or it's going to have a big impact on how you fundraise, what you're expected to fundraise, what is a lot. So in my race, I put in a total of $250,000. I raised $100,000 and put in about $150,000 of my own money, including family donations. And that's a lot. And you know, there was even something in the recorder, and you know, they like ranked that year in 2015 how much people spent on races. It was far from being the highest. There was one number, I think it was 600,000 in Los Angeles. But it definitely varies. In San Francisco, this is a county where there are a lot of people and a lot of groundwork campaign goes into it. In fact, I think that San Franciscans expect to see their candidates out in the street. They expect to meet you and to have some type of personal contact with you or with groups that they find that they gravitate towards or they may be members of. And I know that in some other counties, that's not the case. Either they're rural, they're too big, or like Los Angeles, for example, a lot goes into the mailers.
Right. And Danny, isn't what your campaign was, there was a runoff, right? So yours was a little more. You had to go longer. You kind of had two campaigns.
Right. No, that's a great point. The amount that I've quoted is for February through November. So that includes the primary, which was then in June, and the general in November.
Right.
I missed it by a little bit.
A little bit.
You know, that's a significant amount of money. Judge-elect Evangelista.
So my election that was in November, my budget was $150,000. Came pretty close to raising that. We're not done with, you know, closing out some of the debt, but we came pretty close. I could have spent more and you could have spent less. It's kind of like a wedding in some ways, right? You can go way over the top, and then there's just some things that you absolutely need. You know, you need a consultant, you need somebody to put together your thoughts and who you are, and be able to transmit that so that people know you're running and what you're about. I think that people wonder, well, what's the money going to? It's just so that people know you're running. I mean, that's when it comes down to it, that's what it is. It's If you have so much money that you can, you know, get into persuasion, right, to persuade people, you know, I think in San Francisco, you know, like I said, I spent $150,000, and that to me seemed like a lot of money. I try to spend it really wisely and just getting out to the key voters. And like Judge Flores said, I think that what's really important is just getting out there yourself. Your time is money too. I mean, time is valuable, and you're out there every day in the morning at, you know, the bus stops, meeting people, which is part of what I enjoyed the most about the campaign. But also you have to hand them, you know, a little card or a little something to remember you by when they go to the polls. And that, you know, printing costs, you know, design costs, that's where the money goes to. It's nothing over the top and fancy, you know, at least in my experience for my campaign. It was just putting my name and my face on a card that people can remember and say, oh yeah, I actually met her. Yeah.
Yeah, Judge Lichtcblau.
So I am blanking. I must have intentionally erased it from my memory because it was such a traumatic experience. But I think my numbers were somewhat close to Judge Flores. I think the total was somewhere around 240, 230, something like that. That was, of course, to get through the primary and the general election. So that was approximately 9 months of campaigning, kind of like having a baby. And in Marin County, what I was told by my consultants was that it was a mail county, meaning people read their mail, which I always thought was sort of interesting because you get these flyers and who's looking at them. But the consultants that I had hired said, look, this is an older demographic, and a lot of the voters like to take their mail and stack up all the kind of the different flyers and then go through it when they are trying to figure out who to vote for. And so you need to do a lot of mail. Well, if you think about postage for mail, it's incredibly expensive when you start thinking of how much it costs to send to each household. So each mailer could be, depending on how you could figure out the numbers, can be $30,000 easily. If you're going to do a couple mailers in the primary, which you need to, because then your opponents are putting out mail, you have to do at least a couple. That adds up really quickly. And so that's where, at least for me, the bulk of the money went, which meant that I had to raise or contribute out of my own income, which I did, a certain amount of money.